Shane, what are you doing? Okay, that was Haken.
What's up, guys? So this is a video that I've kind of had on the back burner for the last week. As you guys must know by now, I went to Toronto last week to see Dream Theater live, and I got to spend the week with my friend Shane as well as Notes Reviews. Now, planning out this trip started back in around October, November-ish, when Notes, Shane, and I were all attending the Haken concert in Toronto on Halloween. And when tickets went on sale for the Dream Theater show, it was pretty clear we all wanted to go to this. So after a few months of careful planning, we finally got to the day that Shane and I were leaving Sudbury on our way to Toronto. Our trip starts on a sunny Wednesday morning up north in Sudbury. Can't believe it, there's no outlets on this bus, no Wi-Fi.
Unreal.
Slacking. Anyway, this is the drug pouch. As you can see, I've got some black tar heroin, a bit of marijuana, and some cocaine. Should keep me nice and healthy for my trip. There was originally snow in the forecast for that day, but we managed to escape the worst of it up in Sudbury, and the conditions stayed really nice all the way through to Parry Sound. Sure are making swift progress to Toronto, aren't we?
Yeah, it's actually a little chilly on here.
Well, you know, it's just all that wind from the movement we are experiencing.
Probably feeling a draft on the dome, too.
After Parry Sound, once we got to about the Georgian Bay Barrie area, things started to look a little different with snow squalls and precipitation in the forecast, but we managed to just escape the worst of that by the time we got to Toronto as well.
Bacon.
Bacon. So we're in Parry Sound. Or as I call it, P-Stop, Re-Sound. And even though it threatened to dampen the whole experience in Toronto and there was rain in the city before we got there, thankfully the skies cleared by the time we actually got to Toronto.
Wow.
Upon actually arriving in Toronto, we met up with Notes Reviews. We didn't actually do a lot of filming that evening because we spent a lot of it just kind of getting to know each other, getting our bearings on our plans for those 3 days. took a trip to a nice little sushi restaurant on Queen Street East. Absolutely wonderful sushi. Shane and I bought a couple of drinks. We went back to Notes' place, listened to some Baroness, Fido, and turned in for the night, which leads us into the next morning, where we had breakfast at a superhero-themed cafe called BAM, also on Queen Street East. Alright, so we did suspiciously little filming yesterday, eh? Yeah. So now, we're walking with this gentleman to find ourselves some breakfast. Forage for food. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So, yeah, we had a good evening last night, listened to plenty of vinyl. Exposed this fine young lad over here to some Devin Townsend. And tonight it's Dream Theater.
All right, Dream Theater.
Yeah.
All of the keyboard noodlies that I can handle. But first, superhero breakfast.
So you finally figured out which one you're doing?
That's tempting. I think though, I'm going with the challenge. Just, my body is ready. After breakfast, we spent a bit of time gallivanting around downtown Toronto, checking out a couple of Notes' favorite record stores, including Rotate This on Ossington and Sonic Boom on Spadina. Now, I didn't buy a lot of merchandise on this concert trip, but we actually did spend a fair amount of money on vinyl records. So my haul for this trip starts with Boston's Third Stage, the Dillinger Escape Plan's Irony is a Dead Scene. We did listen to this one at Notes' place afterwards. Loved it. Porcupine Trees, The Sky Moves Sideways. Still haven't had a chance to listen to this one yet. And lastly, a little something for my girlfriend, Sonata Arctica's Ecliptica. Absolutely wonderful power metal record. So after going back to Notes' apartment, taking a listen to a couple of the records we purchased, we decided to make our way over to the Sony Center for the Performing Arts, where Dream Theater was about to perform. We stopped for dinner at a lovely little burger shop in Toronto called The Works, where we enjoyed some really good burgers. While I was dealing with a technical mishap on my iPhone, go automatic updates. But eventually we did make our way to the Sony Center for the Performing Arts to catch Dream Theater's Distance Over Time and Scenes from a Memory 20th Anniversary Tour. Alright, so we're here at the Limp Bizkit show. So now we get to the bit where I actually talk about the concert. It was a great show. It did have a couple of little issues that marred it a little bit for me personally. I got to spend the first half of the show sitting in front of an audience member who was kicking my seat. It was just starting to drive me a little mad. The sound mix wasn't as great as I'd hoped it would be, considering that John Petrucci's guitar tone was so amazing on the record. I was hoping that the actual mix in the show would be a little bit better, but I did find at first the guitars were a little too heavy, and you couldn't hear much of anything else that was going on. John Mayung's bass was actually drowned out pretty much most of the show, except for the important bits that he plays. Dream Theater's first set focused mostly on material from their new album, and I kind of wish there was a little bit more variety because they played 4 songs from Distance Over Time. They did an absolutely wonderful job of them, but it did feel a little too much like they were heavily focusing on the new record. To make matters a little worse for the first half of the set list, the time that they spent focusing on material from the other records was about half an hour's worth of time, yet in Dream Theater land, that's only 2 songs, where they played A Nightmare to Remember from Black Clouds and Silver Linings, which also proved that Mike Mangini is pretty good at blast beats. And In the Presence of Enemies Part 1, I was kind of hoping they might bust into Part 2, but I was more than happy to see they played Part 1 anyway. There were a couple little John Petrucci flubs here and there, but, you know, nothing too severe, just kind of actually enough to remind you that John Petrucci is a human being. So of course the second set in the concert was devoted entirely to a performance of Scenes from a Memory in its entirety. And predictably, the band did an incredible job performing those songs. It's almost like they've been playing those songs for 20 years. It was during this part of the set that I was pretty much right into it. There was no more seat kicker, and I was just singing along with every note, air guitaring to every solo. I was just totally enraptured by Dream Theater's performance. Even some of the sound issues seemed to have been fixed by then. Although there was a funny moment during Through Her Eyes where there was a very touching graphic going on the screen behind them with, you know, just a tribute to all of the artists over the last few years that have been very influential that have passed away, like Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington, stuff like that. And, you know, we're all getting emotionally into it, and then the screen dies. Yeah, I laughed a lot during that part. That was a very awkward emotional release. But the band handled it quite professionally and admirably. James LaBrie came out on stage, told a few jokes, got the crowd back into it. Speaking of James LaBrie, I know a lot of people tend to criticize his performances on stage. I've got to say, though, he was pretty much spot on the whole night. I think there were only a couple times where it felt like he was maybe overreaching a little, but honestly, I was very surprised at how good James LaBrie's voice was on stage. Might have been a little bit of an emotional connection to him because for him, it was something of a hometown show. Screw off with that. You were born in Penetanguishene. That'd be like me claiming I live in Sault Ste. Marie. All in all, though, it was one of the better shows I've been to. I do wish there was a little more variety in the first half of the set, but they did Pull Me Under as an encore. Just a really good way to close out the show. Band performed excellently on the track, just like they did with every other song. If you had to describe the Dream Theater show with one bodily function, which would it be?
Won't call, man.
With one what?
If you had to describe the Dream Theater show with one bodily function, what would it be?
That's an odd description. Tears? I would say tears, that's...
Correct.
A climax of intense feelings.
And with that, we made our way back to Note's apartment, where we got ourselves ready for the next day. So there we have it, guys. That was the Dream Theater show, and we're just finishing up at this random YouTuber's house. And I guess we're about to go out on the town for a little bit before our Greyhound. So yeah, the Dream Theater show, it sucked. All of the musicians in that band are crap, and the vocalist is one of the most terrible vocalists that's ever existed, and the guitar solos are really uninspired. It just really pissed me off. In fact, it pissed me off so much. Like, I'm not even wearing pants. Now, Notes had to leave pretty early that day, and our Greyhound was around 4 p.m., so there was a little bit of floating around Toronto, just trying to kill time before our bus. So after packing up and leaving, we grabbed ourselves some breakfast at a Tim Hortons somewhere in Toronto's massive underground mall called The Path, and made our way to a local hotspot in Toronto that I'm a big fan of, Steve's Music. Now, Steve's Music is a great place for guitars. I once purchased a guitar. Actually, funny enough, the video that's most watched on my personal channel is a review of a PV Predator guitar, which I purchased at Steve's Music. But I also, whenever I'm in Toronto, kind of make it a point to check out whatever sheet music offerings they have. And I found this lovely book of Black Clouds and Silver Lining sheet music. I was so excited to have the guitar tablature book for this album, finally, despite having a PDF copy of it on my computer, and I was just so stoked to play it until I realized keyboard transcriptions. Well, guess I'm learning keyboards now. After that, we made our way to another local hotspot that I really like, Kinton Ramen, for lunch. And we spent a little bit of time at Anime Extreme. Now, I'm not the anime fan I used to be, and as far as I knew, Shane wasn't really into it, but we actually both found things we really liked there.
Alright, so we're off to get some hentai.
No.
A lot of superhero stuff, a lot of anime stuff. I was a little disappointed not to see any Initial D stuff there. That was a little disappointing. After that, we made our way back to the Greyhound station, waited for our bus, and got on to find out again that there were no outlets on the bus. There weren't any outlets on the bus coming down from Sudbury, nor were there any going back up to Sudbury. It did kind of dampen the ride, as there was a lot of range anxiety with the batteries on our phones. Also didn't help that there was this annoying guy sitting across the aisle from us who was just blasting hip-hop out of his smartphone the whole time. It's always hip-hop. Why can't people blast, like, Dillinger Escape Plan or Tchaikovsky? So, all in all, it was a great trip. Shane and I had a lot of fun. I sure hope Notes had a lot of fun. There were a lot of really great memories formed on that trip, and I think Shane and I have made a very valuable friend in Notes Reviews, and I'd really like to thank Notes Reviews for his hospitality during this trip. You were an absolutely incredible host. You have my eternal gratitude. Thank you. I can't wait to do this again. So, until next time, Lausho out.
Scatter bush, will you do the fandango?